The alphas equal. Boom, boom, boom. The drums shake the obsidian walls. I can feel them in my teeth, in my bones, in the part of me that has been trained since childhood to run from power, not toward it. But I'm done running. A guard steps into my path. He tells me this entrance is forbidden to me. The Alpha's archway, he says, is not a place for women. I let him sit in those words. Let him feel how small they sound when spoken aloud. I tell him I've crossed the Bleed Mountains in winter. I've survived the Hollow Plague without medicine. I've lived in territories that would make his nightmares look like children's stories. And he's going to stop me with a sentence? He tells me the Arch will stop me, that I'll be exposed as a fraud in front of 10,000 witnesses and dragged out in disgrace. I lean close enough to see the sweat forming on his brow. Then step aside, I say, and let me be exposed. The crowd sees me coming before I reach the Arch. I hear the questions ripple like a wave across a lake, confused, amused, then suddenly very, very quiet. And then the Arch lights up like a second sun. White. Blazing. Absolute. I don't stop walking. My name is Karen Wilson, and I was never supposed to be here. I was born in Vethra, a dust town at the far edge of the sunken valleys, the kind of place cartographers forget to label. We had 30 families, 1 well, and 2 rules. Keep your head down, and don't attract the attention of the Alpha clans. I broke both rules before I was 12. It started with a boy named Ren. He was the village elder's son, broad-shouldered even then, already radiating that early warmth of Alpha potential. He found me alone behind the grain store one afternoon, and his expression said everything his mouth hadn't figured out how to say yet. He told me I shouldn't wander alone, that it was dangerous for girls my size. I told him it was dangerous for boys who underestimated girls my size. He laughed. I didn't. 3 seconds later, he was face down in the dirt, and I was walking back to the house with bruised knuckles and a strange, electric feeling in my chest, like lightning that had nowhere to go. My mother saw my hands at dinner. She said nothing for a long moment, then set down her spoon. "Karen," she said, "what you are, whatever it is that lives inside you, you must hide it. Do you understand me? Hide it like your life depends on it. Because it does." "What am I, Mama?" She looked at me then, with those tired, frightened eyes that had seen too much of the world. "The world isn't ready for the answer to that question," she said. She was wrong. I just had to make it ready. I spent the next 14 years learning every hard thing the world had to offer. I trained in secret, combat, strategy, survival, the study of alpha hierarchy and clan law. I traveled when I could. I worked, I fought, I endured. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth of what I was assembled itself inside me like a map being drawn in real time. I wasn't just strong. I wasn't just capable. I was alpha. Female, rare, almost mythological, but alpha all the same. And when I heard about the Dominion election, when I heard the neutral territory would open its gates to every alpha in the known regions, I packed one bag. And I walked. But before the walk, before the Arch, before any of them knew my name, there was another gathering. One that no history recorded. One that planted the first seed of everything I would become. I was 11 years old when my mother took me to the convocation of the Southern clans. It was not meant for people like us. We were there because my mother worked for a trader who supplied the gathering, and she needed extra hands. I was meant to stay in the kitchens, invisible, forgotten. But I was never good at staying where I was supposed to stay. The convocation was held in a valley between 3 territories, neutral ground, like the Dominion but smaller, older, less polished. Alphas and their families came from every direction. I watched them from behind cooking tents and supply wagons, memorizing the way they moved, the way they commanded space without seeming to try. And I watched one family in particular, the Blood Crows. Even then, they were feared. Thorn, Nicholas's father, was a legend among alphas. Taller than any man I had ever seen, with the same storm-dark eyes that his son would inherit. His wife, Mira, stood beside him with the quiet confidence of a woman who had never needed to prove anything. And between them, a boy of about 12 or 13, already broad-shouldered, already watching the world with an intensity that made the other children give him space. Nicholas. I didn't know his name then. I only knew that when I looked at him, something in my chest went very still. The trouble came on the second day. There was a territorial dispute, old blood, old grudges, the kind of thing that alphas were supposed to settle with words, but sometimes settled with teeth. Thorn had been called to mediate, and he had brought his family with him because the neutral valley was supposed to be safe. It wasn't. 3 alphas from the Eastern Territories had come to the convocation with a grudge against Thorn's line. They had been waiting for an opportunity, and the mediation chamber, separate from the main gathering, poorly guarded, gave them their opening. I saw them move toward the building where the Blood Crow family waited. I saw the guards look away at the wrong moment. I saw the glint of steel that should never have been drawn on neutral ground. I was 11 years old. I had been training in secret for less than a year. I had no business being anywhere near alpha violence. But I saw Mira step in front of her son. I saw Thorn turn, too late, already reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. I saw Nicholas, just a boy with his father's eyes and his mother's fierce protectiveness, push his mother behind him and stand in front of both of them. And I saw that 3 grown alphas, armed and determined, were going to tear that family apart in the next 30 seconds unless someone stopped them. I didn't think. I moved. I was small, quick, invisible to men who were looking for threats their own size. I slipped between the tents, under the edge of the mediation chamber's awning, and I did something that no one had ever taught me to do. I pushed. Not physically. Something deeper. Something that lived in my chest and woke up when I needed it most. I pushed against the alpha presence of those 3 men with everything I had, and for one stunned moment, one impossible, suspended moment, they stopped. They turned. They looked at me, a dirt-streaked girl in kitchen clothes, barely reaching their shoulders, and they hesitated. That hesitation was enough. The guards, alerted by the disturbance, burst into the chamber. Thorn, freed from the encirclement, moved with the speed of a man who had survived too many wars to be caught twice. The 3 attackers were subdued before they could recover from their confusion. But I saw the way Thorn looked at me before the guards took the attackers away. The same way Nicholas would look at me years later, across the Dominion platform. Arrested. Astonished. Recognizing something he had no framework to understand. Thorn and Mira approached me as the chaos settled. Mira was beautiful in the way that powerful women are, not soft, not fragile, but radiant with a warmth that made you want to stand in its light. Thorn lowered himself to my level, and his hand came up to touch my face with a gentleness that made my throat tighten. "Child," he said, "you saved us." I didn't know what to say. I had never been thanked for what I was. I had only ever been told to hide it. I just closed my mouth with my hands in wonder. He stood beside me and reached for my throat and unclasped something, a chain, fine and delicate, with a small pendant in the shape of a crow in flight. The metal was dark, almost black, but when it caught the light, veins of silver ran through it like lightning trapped in stone. "This has been in my family for 7 generations, Thorn said. "It was worn by my grandmother and her mother before her. It is said to recognize truth. To warm when its wearer is near their destiny." He pressed it into my palm. "You will keep it. And when you look at it, you will remember that there are people in this world who see you, who owe you something they can never repay." I tried to give it back. I told them I didn't do it for a reward. Mira smiled. "I know. That is why it is yours." It was clasped around my neck. The metal was cold against my skin for only a moment. Then it warmed, settling against my chest like it had always been there. Thorn came to stand beside his wife. He was not a man who smiled easily, but He looked at me with something that might have been the closest thing to awe I had ever seen on an alpha's face. "What is your name?" he asked. "Karen." "Karen," he repeated. "The blood crow line does not forget its debts. Whatever you need, wherever you go, if you carry that chain, you carry our name with it." Nicholas was standing behind his parents. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't moved. But he was watching me with those dark, storm-colored eyes, and in them I saw something that I would remember for the next 14 years. He saw me, not as a kitchen girl, not as an interruption, as something he had never encountered before and did not know how to look away from. His mother noticed. She smiled, a small, knowing curve of her mouth, and rested her hand on her son's shoulder. "Nicholas," she said quietly, "remember her face." "I will," he said. And he did. I wore the chain that night when we left the convocation. I wore it through the Bleed Mountains. I wore it through the Hollow Plague. I wore it through every hard mile and every hidden training session and every moment when I thought I might break. I never took it off. Not once. In the years that followed, when I read the sealed reports about Nicholas of the Blood Crow clan, when I saw the redacted files and the terrifying battle records, I would run my fingers over the silver veins of that pendant and remember. I saved him once. I was 11 years old, and I was already what I would become. The arch at Dominion would not be the first time I walked into something that was never built for me. And Nicholas of the Blood Crow clan was not the only one who had been waiting. The amphitheater of Dominion is the most powerful place I have ever stood in. It is carved from obsidian, the black rock of the neutral territory, and it rises in rings toward an open sky that feels like it belongs to no one and everyone at once. The sun hits the walls in the morning and turns everything gold. Right now, in this pre-ceremony hour, it is burning amber and shadow. 10,000 people fill the stands. Delegates, observers, clan members who have traveled hundreds of miles just to witness this. And at the center of it all, the magnetic archway, ancient, humming, impossible to fool. I had studied it. Every recorded account I could find. The arch responds to alpha signature, a biological resonance that cannot be faked, bought, or borrowed. The elders calibrated it centuries ago, and it has never once been wrong. The problem, historically, is that no one thought to test whether a female alpha could trigger it. Because the last female alpha recorded in any clan history lived 400 years ago. Her name was Seraphine of the Tide clan, and the records say she vanished before the election that year. Some say she was murdered. Some say she ran. I wasn't planning to vanish. I stood at the mouth of the entrance tunnel and watched the alphas walk through ahead of me, one by one, announced by the elder herald with a kind of booming gravitas that made my teeth ache. Each one massive, each one magnetic, each one the kind of man who filled a room simply by existing in it. The arch chimed for them in deep, resonant blue. I counted them. 17 alphas. Different sizes, different regions, different temperaments. I had researched every single one. Read their histories, their battle records, their political alignments. If I was going to win this election, I needed to understand what I was walking into. One name had made me pause when I first read the clan registries. Nicholas of the Blood Crow clan. His file was the thinnest. Not because there wasn't information, there was more information about Nicholas than about most of the others combined. The file was thin because most of it was redacted, classified, sealed under elder authority. What remained was sparse and terrifying. Undefeated in 14 recorded territorial battles. 3 challengers had submitted to him before a single blow was struck, simply from proximity. He had held Blood Crow territory for 6 years without a single attempted coup. And then a single, unclassified note from a regional elder observer, handwritten in the margin of a report. His eyes, when he is displeased, are the color of the sea before a storm. No one who has seen that expression twice has ever tested him a third time. I read that note 3 times. Each time, my fingers found the chain at my throat, The blood crow heirloom that had warmed against my skin for 14 years, that had never once felt like anything but mine. I thought about a boy with storm-dark eyes who had promised to remember my face. I had told myself it didn't matter. I had told myself he was just another alpha and I had learned to handle alphas. I would shortly discover how profoundly I had underestimated the situation. I step out of the tunnel into the full light of the amphitheater, and the first thing I hear is silence. Not quiet. Silence. The active, stunned kind that happens when 10,000 people all stop breathing at the same moment. The guards move toward me. I see their hands go to their weapons. I see the elder herald look up from his scroll with a frown that deepens with every step I take. On the contenders' platform ahead, 17 enormous men turn to look at me. I keep walking. A young guard steps into my path and tells me I need to redirect to the public observation gallery. I tell him I'm not here to watch. A senior guard steps forward, harder-eyed, tells me the arch is sacred, that if I approach without alpha status, I'll be banned for life. He tells me to walk away now, and they'll consider this a misunderstanding. I ask him what happens if I don't walk away. He says they'll escort me out with significantly less courtesy. I look at him for a long moment, then past him to the arch, then back to him. I'm going to walk to that arch, I say. You can step aside, or you can follow me there. But I promise you, and you should take this promise seriously, that whichever choice you make, you're going to feel very foolish in about 30 seconds. He doesn't step aside, but he doesn't stop me either. Maybe something in my voice, maybe something in my eyes, maybe the fact that I've already started walking and he simply hasn't processed it yet. I walk. The arch is 30 feet away, then 20, then 10. I feel it before I reach it. A warmth, a recognition, like the feeling of walking into a room where someone has lit a fire in your name. The chain at my throat grows warm against my skin, pulsing gently in a rhythm that matches my heartbeat. I have never felt it respond to anything like this before. It is as if the pendant recognizes where I am going, as if it has been waiting for this moment as long as I have. The arch begins to vibrate, softly at first, almost a whisper, then louder, then white. Blinding, absolute, total white light, pouring from the arch in waves. And beneath the white, silver, shimmering, dancing silver that none of the records had ever described, because no one had ever seen it before. The chain flares warm against my chest, the silver veins in the pendant glowing in answer to the arch's light. For one suspended moment, I feel the weight of 14 years on my shoulders, the convocation, the saving, the promise I made to myself in the aftermath of that day. I walk through. For one suspended moment, the light holds me. I feel it read me. The word that comes to mind, though it sounds impossible, is recognizing. As if the arch had been waiting for me and simply hadn't known it. Then I am through. And the amphitheater loses its mind. The noise is physical. It hits me like a wave, screaming, shouting, the pounding of 10,000 feet on stone risers. Half of it sounds like celebration. Half sounds like outrage. All of it is shock. I tune it out. My focus narrows to the path between me and the contender's platform. 40 feet of open ground. The alphas are watching me, their massive frames turned toward me with expressions I don't have time to read individually. I catalog them as I walk. Surprise, calculation, threat assessment, curiosity. And then it hits me. I don't have a word for it. No one would. It is simultaneously the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing I have ever felt. A warmth that begins in my chest and expands outward until it fills my entire body. A pull like gravity, but interior. A sudden, overwhelming awareness that I am not alone in this world in the way I thought I was. That somewhere, 30 feet away, someone knows exactly what I am. And I know them. My hand goes to my throat. The chain is hot now, not burning, but alive, thrumming with a recognition that goes deeper than any magic I had ever studied. The pendant pulses against my skin like a second heartbeat, and in that pulse I feel something that makes my breath catch. It is responding to him. The blood crow heirloom, given to me by Mira on a day I saved her son's life, is warming to him across a distance of 30 feet. As if it had always known that our paths would cross again. As if it had been waiting. I have never believed in fate. I am a woman who makes her own path, through sheer force of will. I've built my entire life on the principle that destiny is what you create, not what is handed to you. And yet, I remember a boy with storm-dark eyes. I remember his mother's hand on my shoulder. I remember the words. Remember her face. And I know with a certainty that has nothing to do with logic that he has. My steps falter. Just once, just for a fraction of a second, but I falter. My hand goes to my sternum without my permission, pressing against my chest as if I can physically hold in the feeling that is threatening to swallow me whole. I don't look. I refuse to look. I know, with bone-deep certainty, that if I look toward whatever is pulling me, I will not be able to look away. I keep walking. I made it to the base of the platform steps before my body truly began to revolt. My skin was burning. Not painfully, worse than painfully. With a longing so deep and specific it felt like grief and hope braided together. My heartbeat had doubled. My hands, which never shake, were trembling at my sides. I took the first step, and then his gaze found me. I felt it before I saw it. A pressure at the back of my neck, specific, targeted, different from the general sensation of a crowd's attention. This was singular. One set of eyes, carrying the weight of a storm. My discipline cracked, just barely, just for a heartbeat, and I looked. He is at the far end of the platform. Taller than I expected, which is already saying something. Dark, severe features arranged into an expression that is not any of the things I predicted from his file. Not anger. Not dismissal. Not the flat, bored assessment of an alpha who has already cataloged and categorized everything in his environment. He looks arrested, like something had reached into his chest and stopped his heart mid-beat. His eyes found mine across 30 feet of open platform, and the world narrowed to a pinpoint. Stormdark. The same Stormdark I remember from a valley 14 years ago, from a boy who promised to remember my face. And in them, something that makes every instinct I possess scream at me simultaneously, half warning, half welcome. Recognition. Not just of the bond. Of me. Of the girl in kitchen clothes who stood between him and 3 armed alphas and pushed with something she didn't understand. He knows me. He has been waiting. Mate. The word arrives in my mind unbidden, in a voice that is not quite my own. Ancient. Certain. Absolute. I looked away. God, it hurt. Looking away from him was like tearing something. Like pulling a splinter from deep tissue. My entire body cried out against the decision in terms so visceral I nearly stumbled. I did not stumble. I climbed the platform stairs. 1, 2, 3. My jaw is clenched tight enough to ache. My breathing is a discipline. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. The mate pull is a current, strong and relentless, trying to redirect my every step. My bones are screaming. My blood is fire. My fingers are wrapped around the pendant so tightly, I can feel its edges pressing into my palm. The heat of it grounds me, reminds me of who I am, of what I have already done. I saved his life once. I have worn his family's token for 14 years. I have earned my place here. I will not surrender it because my body recognizes something my mind isn't ready to accept. I have survived the bleed mountains in winter. I have survived the hollow plague without medicine. I would survive this. 4, 5. I reached the top of the platform and walked into the space between the contenders. They parted before me. Not, I suspected, out of respect, though I would take it. More likely out of sheer confusion. They didn't know the protocol for this. None of them did. There was no protocol for this. I found an open position at the far end of the line, and I took it. I stood still. I stared forward. I put every fiber of my training into keeping my face empty and my posture straight. My heart hammered like a war drum. Behind me, I know it without looking, because I can feel the heat of his gaze like sunlight on bare skin. Nicholas of the Blood Crow clan is watching me with an intensity that I have no framework to process. I feel the pendant cool against my skin, settling back into its familiar warmth. But it is different now. Awake. Waiting. Like the bond between us has woken something in it that had been sleeping for 14 years. Good. Let him watch. Let them all watch. I had not come here to be unobserved. I had come here to win. The Elder Council takes 45 minutes to recover from what the Arch has revealed. I know, because I count every second of it. They convened in a huddle at the north end of the platform, 7 ancient figures in white and gold, their voices too low to hear from my position. I watched them peripherally. I watched everything peripherally. My senses, always sharp, were running at a level I'd never accessed before. Every alpha on that platform was an island of heat and magnetism in my awareness. And one was a sun. Nicholas had not moved, had not spoken, had not looked away. I know all of these things without looking at him. I know the distance between us to the inch. I know when his breathing changes, slower now, more controlled. The breathing of a man who is choosing his war very carefully. When the head elder finally speaks, his voice carries the authority of decades. The Arch has spoken, he says. Whatever our traditions have assumed about the nature of alpha succession, the ancient magic does not share our assumptions. The contender who passed is recognized. The competition proceeds. Objections erupt. 4 of the other alphas step forward, voices raised. I hear my name, or rather, the absence of it, since none of them know it yet, in their complaints. She and the woman, and this is unprecedented. I let them talk. The first one to fall quiet is Nicholas. Not because he agrees with the others. Not because he is deferring to authority. He simply stops, stands with his arms at his sides and his eyes on the back of my head, and allows the noise to wash past him like water. When the head elder raises his hand for silence and the platform settles, it is Nicholas's voice, lower than the others, rough-edged and deliberate, that breaks the quiet first. Her name, he says. Not a question. A request that is just barely polite enough to not be a demand. The elder herald looks down at his records. Finds nothing. Looks up. She is not listed, he says. She did not register in advance. Because there was no category for her to register in, Nicholas says. A pause. He has not made it a question. He has not made it a criticism. He has simply stated a fact, in a tone so even and precise that it somehow manages to be more devastating than any raised voice. I turn. It is the first time I face him directly. The first time our eyes meet, without the distance of the platform between us, without the chaos of the moment to dilute it. Up close, he is even more familiar. The same storm-dark eyes. The same set of his jaw. But the boy who promised to remember my face has become something I did not fully prepare for. A man who has earned his reputation in blood and iron. A man whose gaze, when it lands on me, carries the weight of 14 years of wondering. Up close, the file has been useless. The file described a physically imposing man with a reputation for brutality and a political history written in iron. The file did not describe the quality of his stillness, the way he carries his size not as bulk but as gravitational mass, as if the world organizes itself slightly around him. The file did not describe his eyes. Storm dark, deep, and watching me with an attention so complete and absolute it is almost rude. Karen Wilson, I say. My voice comes out steady. I thank every hard mile I have ever walked for that. Wilson, he says, like he is testing the weight of it. Like he is filing it somewhere permanent. No clan affiliation, he asks. Unaffiliated. Independent alpha. Is there a form I need to fill out to make that official? I ask. Something moves in his expression. Not a smile, not quite. More like the shadow of one. The suggestion that somewhere behind the stone wall of his face, something has appreciated that answer. You're not afraid, he says. It isn't a question either. He says it the way a man says something he is genuinely puzzling over, not challenge, not compliment. Observation. Should I be? I ask. Every reasonable person in this amphitheater is afraid of something right now, he says. The elders are afraid of precedent. The contenders are afraid of their assumptions crumbling. The audience is afraid of what it means if everything they believed was wrong. A beat. You are none of those things, he says. I've had longer to adjust to what I am than the rest of you, I say. He studies me. Slow and thorough, the way you study a topographical map before crossing unknown ground. How long have you known, he asks. Since I was 12, I say. When I put an alpha-born boy in the dirt and felt exactly nothing afterward. His eyes flicker, just barely, to my throat, to the chain hidden beneath my collar. His expression doesn't change, but I see something pass through them. Recognition. Confirmation. And you've been hiding it, he says. I've been preparing, I say. For this. For all of it. He is quiet for a moment. Then, so softly that only I can hear. I know you. I don't answer. I can't. The convocation, he says. 14 years ago. You were small. You were wearing kitchen clothes. And you stepped between my family and 3 armed men like it was nothing. My fingers find the pendant without my permission. He sees the movement. His eyes follow my hand. You kept it, he says. There is something in his voice that I have never heard from an alpha before. Something raw. Something that sounds almost like wonder. I told you, I say. I've been preparing for all of it. Another long look. I hold it this time. Don't flinch from it. Don't give him the satisfaction of discomfort. The mate pull is still there, constant, insistent, a low roar beneath everything, but I have learned in the last hour to wall it off. To feel it and not obey it. He notices. Of course he notices. His jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. You feel it, he says. His voice drops. Just slightly. Not for the others. For me. What I feel is irrelevant. I say. Is it? Not a question. A challenge. Dressed so carefully in neutrality that anyone who didn't know better might miss it. The election is what's relevant. I say. The competition. The next 10 years of leadership for every clan and region in the known world. Tell me those things are less important than a biological impulse, Nicholas. His name in my mouth makes the bond flare like a struck match. I feel it. By the minute tension in his frame, so does he. I didn't say it was more important, he says. I said you feel it. And I said it was irrelevant. I say. Can we disagree on that and move on to the part where I compete fairly for a position I have earned? For the first time, the shadow becomes an actual expression. Brief. Controlled. Almost pained. No one has ever spoken to me like that, he says. 11 other people are waiting to speak to you exactly like that. I say. You're just not used to it. Not like that, they aren't. His gaze drops to my throat again. To the chain. To the pendant that marks me as someone his family chose 14 years ago. My mother, he says quietly, would want to know that her chain found its way back. My hand closes around it protectively. It never left. Something shifts in his expression. Something that looks impossibly like gratitude. I know, he says. I can see it. The elder herald announces the beginning of the formal proceedings, and the moment breaks. The other alphas shift, turning to the council. The crowd noise swells. Nicholas holds my gaze for 1 second longer than the moment requires. Karen Wilson, he says, soft, almost private. You are the most interesting thing to happen in this amphitheater in my lifetime. He turns away. I stand there for a full 3 seconds before my legs remember they have a job to do. The election for Alpha Head doesn't go to brute strength alone. If it did, we would all be living under the rule of whoever happened to grow largest, and that's not governance, that's taxonomy. The trials are threefold: knowledge, combat, governance. The first trial, knowledge, begins at dawn the next day, in the chamber of records beneath the amphitheater. Each contender is locked in alone with a complex territorial dispute, a map of resources, and 3 hours to produce a strategy that the Elder Council will judge on 5 criteria. I have prepared for this for 6 years. I am the third one out. Nicholas is the second. He is leaning against the corridor wall when I emerge, arms crossed, looking like he has solved the puzzle the way most men solve furniture assembly, with force and mild annoyance. "How long did it take you?" he asks. 2 hours and 11 minutes, I say. "You?" 2 hours and 4 minutes. 7 minutes, I say. "I'll close the gap." His mouth curves.
"Just barely."
"You speak as though time is the only variable," he says. "Quality over speed," I say. "I know, but I'm also fast, so I'll take both." "What strategy did you use for the Eastern water rights?" he asks. "Weighted arbitration with a 10-year renewable clause and a neutral monitoring body," I say. "You?" "Force shared governance with rotating regional authority." "I consider this." "That's actually better," I say. He looks at me with the expression of a man who is not used to compliments and doesn't know what direction to put them. "I know," he says. "You don't have to sound quite so surprised that I admitted it," I say. "I'm not surprised you admitted it," he says. "I'm surprised you sound like you mean it." "I always mean what I say," I say. "It's inefficient not to." He pushes off the wall. Standing to his full height, he is enormous, a full foot and a half taller than me, which is saying something since I'm not small. I have noticed, in the past 18 hours, that my lack of physical intimidation seems to unsettle him. He is accustomed to being the largest thing in any room and having that communicate something. With me, it communicates nothing, and he doesn't know what to do about that. Good. Uncertainty is something I can work with. "The next trial is combat," he says. "I'm aware. I don't hold back in combat. Neither do I. It will be different when we face each other." I meet his gaze directly. "Because of the bond?" "Because of the bond." "Then you'd better learn to separate your instincts from your objectives, Nicholas," I say. "Because I certainly intend to." Something moves across his face, quick and dark and not entirely readable. "Has anyone ever told you that you are extremely difficult?" he asks. "Everyone who has tried to stop me," I say. I've started considering it a compliment. He stares at me for a long moment. Then he laughs. It is not what I expect. Brief, low, and entirely genuine. The laugh of a man who is rarely surprised and doesn't know quite what to do with the feeling when it arrives. It transforms his face so completely and so unexpectedly that for one unguarded second I stare at him like he is something I have never seen before. Which, in fairness, he is. "Get some sleep, Karen Wilson," he says. "You're going to need it." He walks away. I stand in the corridor for considerably longer than I should, staring at the space he occupied. Then I go to sleep. But before I do, I take the chain from beneath my collar and hold it in my palm, watching the way the silver veins catch the torchlight. 14 years I have worn this. 14 years I have carried the Blood Crow name with me across mountains and through plagues. And now, after all that time, I have found the boy who promised to remember my face. I have found him, and I have walked away from him. Again. I am beginning to suspect that walking away from Nicholas of the Blood Crow clan is going to be the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder than the mountains. Harder than the plague. Harder than any of it. I close my fingers around the pendant and sleep. They draw positions by lot for the second trial, combat. I face 7 different opponents over 2 days. I win 5. I draw 1. I lose 1. To Kim of Northbridge, who is built like a moving wall and has the tactical patience of a siege weapon. He beats me fair and square in under 6 minutes, and I shake his hand afterward with genuine respect. He nods at me in a way that I am starting to recognize as the alpha equivalent of a standing ovation. Nicholas wins all 7 of his bouts. Not quickly. He fights each one fully, gives each opponent the respect of his complete attention. But the outcome is never seriously in doubt. We're the last pair. I had known we would be. The matchmakers structured it that way, saved the most watched pairing for last. Keep the audience riveted. I don't begrudge them the theater. I have theater of my own to deliver. We meet in the center of the combat ring as the amphitheater holds its collective breath. Up this close, no platform, no formality, just 6 feet of open ground between us. The bond is deafening. My skin is electric. My heart is in open revolt against my intentions. The chain around my neck is warm, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat, as if it is counting down to something I cannot name. He stands across from me with his hands loose at his sides and his dark eyes moving over my face with an attention that is both professional and something else entirely. Last chance to propose a draw, he says. First chance I've had to hear you suggest one, I say. Are you nervous? No. Neither am I. I know, he says. That's the problem. The elder's whistle sounds. He is fast. Faster than something that size has any right to be. His first move is a controlled feint, testing my reactions, not committing, reading how I move. I don't take the bait. I roll wide, come back in low, get a grip on his arm that any lesser opponent would have found very inconvenient. Nicholas is not lesser. He adjusts with a smoothness that tells me everything about how many hours of his life he has spent in training, not enough to escape my hold, but enough to turn it from an advantage to a stalemate. We struggle there, locked together, for several long seconds that the crowd seems to experience as an eternity. His voice finds me, low and private, through the noise. You're better than the others think you are, he says. I know that. Better than I expected. I'm going to remind you of that when I beat you. You're not going to beat me. Then why do you sound like you're trying to convince yourself? He breaks the grip, comes back with a move I hadn't anticipated from a man his size. Fast, low, attacking my balance rather than my strength. Smart. He identified my center of gravity in the first 30 seconds, and he has been planning that moment ever since. I go down, and I take him with me. We hit the ground together, which is not a planned outcome for either of us. The crowd erupts. In the scramble for position that follows, I am faster. Not stronger, not heavier, but faster, and I find the controlling position first. I am on top of him, one hand pinning his wrist to the ground, the other at his throat. The chain swings free from my collar, the pendant brushing against his chest. He goes still beneath me. His eyes drop to the pendant, to his mother's heirloom, now resting against his skin, warm from my body, pulsing with the same recognition that has been building between us for days. His voice, when it comes, is barely a whisper. You really kept it. I told you, I say. It never left. Nicholas goes still beneath me. The entire amphitheater goes still. An alpha yielding to another is a precise thing. It isn't defeat, it is acknowledgement. And in the frozen second where neither of us moves, the reality of the position is not lost on either of us. He is looking up at me, and his expression is the most unguarded thing I have seen from him, something raw and unfiltered moving behind his eyes like weather. Well, he says. Just the one word. Quiet. Almost awed. I release him. Stand. Step back. He rises to his feet without haste, dusting his hands together, and looks at me with an expression I cannot read, and am not sure I want to. The elder judge announces the result. A draw, by official ruling, though everyone in that amphitheater knows I held the winning position when the whistle should have blown. The crowd's reaction is indescribable. Nicholas inclines his head to me. Not a bow, too slight for that, but deliberate. Acknowledged. I return the gesture. For a moment, standing there in the center of the ring with the noise of 10,000 people washing over us, something passes between us that has nothing to do with competition. Then he reaches out, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, and touches the pendant that still hangs outside my collar. His fingers brush against it, against the skin of my throat, and the bond flares so brightly, I nearly gasp. My mother's chain, he says. On your neck for 14 years. I told you, I say. I've been preparing for all of it. He holds my gaze. So have I. Then we both turn and walk to our respective sides of the ring, and I spend the next 20 minutes convincing myself that I have not just irrevocably complicated everything. The keep's east garden exists in that particular way of very old places, slowly, with the confidence of something that has outlasted most of the people who have tried to rush it. Stone benches. A fountain in the center that has been running for 300 years. And at night, when the amphitheater torches are reflected in the water, it has the quality of a dream that you don't want to wake from. I find it by accident. I am walking to clear my head, and my legs take me somewhere quiet. The bond has been relentless all day, a constant pressure behind my sternum, like a fist slowly tightening, and the crowds and the noise of the keep's common areas are not helping. I sit on one of the stone benches and let the fountain sound wash over me. I get 3 minutes of silence before I hear footsteps. I know who it is before he comes around the garden wall. Of course I know. The bond flares like a signal fire, directional and specific. I consider leaving. I have about a 12-second window. I stay. Nicholas rounds the corner of the wall and sees me, and for just a fraction of a second, so brief it is almost imaginary, he looks like a man who has found something he has been searching for without knowing he was searching. Then his expression settles back into its usual composed gravity, and he walks toward the fountain, as if he intended to come here all along. The common room is suffocating, he says. Agreed. He settles onto the bench across from mine. Not beside me, across. 6 feet of fountain between us. It should be enough distance. It isn't. We sit in silence for a while. Surprisingly, it is comfortable. Nicholas, I am learning, does not fill silence with words. He inhabits it, the way large things inhabit space, fully, without apology, without the anxiety that silence is something to be fixed. I find myself grateful for it. You're not sleeping, he says. Clearly, I say. Neither are you. How long has it been like this for you? The awareness. I don't pretend to understand. Since I walked through the arch, I say. You, since I saw you at the tunnel entrance, he says. Before the arch. I look at him. That's not how it's supposed to work. The bond requires proximity. I know how the bond is supposed to work, he says. I also know what I felt when you came out of that tunnel. A beat. That doesn't make things easier, I say. No. It doesn't. More silence. The fountain keeps its counsel. Above us, the stars do what they always do. Burn quietly and indifferently and beautifully against a black sky. I'm not going to stop competing, I say. I know. And I'm not going to let the bond change my objectives. I've built my entire life toward this. I know that too. Then we understand each other. Karen. My name in his voice is a different thing than it is in anyone else's. Lower. Careful. Like something he handles with deliberate attention because he already knows it could hurt him. I've never wanted something I couldn't simply take, he says. I look at him steadily. And now I understand that some things don't work that way, he says. And I find myself unprepared for the education. Something in my chest shifts. Something warm and unwelcome and absolutely inconvenient. You're asking me to give you time, I say. I'm telling you I won't rush you, he says. Which is not the same thing. It sounds like the same thing. No. Rushing implies I'm uncertain of the outcome. I'm not. My heart does something highly unprofessional. That is a very arrogant thing to say, I say. It's an honest thing to say, he says. I thought you valued honesty. I value it in other people, I say. In you, it's currently inconvenient. He smiles. A real one, this time, brief and quiet and devastating in its unexpectedness, because it changes the entire architecture of his face into something that I'm going to have very significant difficulty forgetting. Go to sleep, Karen Wilson, he says. You first. I'll wait until you're safely inside. I stand. Look at him. I don't need. I start. I know you don't need it, he says. I need it. Will you allow me that? The distinction stops me completely. I know you don't need it. I need it. No one has ever asked me for that particular kind of permission before. Fine, I say. I walk back toward the keep. At the garden entrance, something makes me stop and look back. He is still there, still watching. And in the fountain's reflected light, for just a moment, he looks less like the most feared alpha in the regions and more like someone who has learned something unexpected today and is very quietly deciding what to do about it. I touch the pendant at my throat, his mother's chain, warm against my skin. 14 years I have carried it, and only now do I understand why I have never been able to take it off. It wasn't just a token of gratitude. It was a promise, a connection, a thread that tied me to him long before either of us understood what we were to each other. I go inside. I don't sleep for 2 hours. The third trial, governance, is the most public, the most brutal, and in my opinion, the most important. They seat the top 8 contenders at a long stone table before a live tribunal of regional representatives. Real cases, real people, real consequences. You are given the file 30 minutes before proceedings begin, and then you govern. In public, with mistakes on display and nowhere to hide. I have been preparing for this my entire life. The first case involves a water rights dispute between 3 valley clans that has been festering for 19 years. 3 previous arbitrators have failed to resolve it. The representatives are hostile, guarded, and exhausted by a conflict they no longer believe can be settled. I read the file in 8 minutes. Spend the remaining 22 in the preparation room, organizing my approach. When the proceedings open, I am the third to speak. The first 2 contenders, capable, experienced men, approach it as a power negotiation. Identify the strongest position and leverage from there. I approach it as a grief counselor might. Before we discuss water allocation, I say, I need to understand something. This dispute has outlived 3 arbitrators and 2 generations of leadership. The legal arguments are documented. The resource calculations are documented. What isn't documented is why 19 years of negotiation has failed.
Can someone tell me that?
Silence. The representatives exchange guarded glances. One of them says it's because the other clans don't negotiate in good faith. Another says it's because the Northern Valley takes more than their allocation and lies about it. A third says it's because the Southern Valley poisons the upstream before it even reaches them. Stop, I say. All 3 of you, stop. The sharpness of my voice cuts through the eruption. The room goes quiet. You came here expecting another arbitrator to tell you who is right, I say. I'm not going to do that. Because in 19 years of being told who is right, nothing has changed. Which tells me that rightness is not the problem. I lean forward. Trust is the problem. And you cannot legislate trust. You can only build it. So, we're not going to start with the water. We're going to start with what happened 19 years ago, before the first dispute was filed. And we're going to stay in that room until we understand why 3 communities that share a watershed also share a wound. It takes 4 hours. By the end of it, the representatives are not friends. But they are tired in a different way than when they arrived, the exhaustion of people who have finally said things they had been holding for a very long time. And in that different exhaustion, a tentative architecture of trust becomes possible. I propose the framework. They agree to it. Conditionally, skeptically, with approximately 70% of the lingering hostility still in the room. But they agree. When the elder judges review the day's proceedings that evening, one of them, a woman I have not spoken with, old enough to have been governing for decades, finds me in the corridor. That was not conventional, she says.
No.
It was also the first time in 7 hearing sessions this week that I have seen Valley representatives leave the room without planning their next legal maneuver.
Good.
You understand that conventional approaches have a reason to exist, she says. I understand they have a history, I say. I'm less convinced they all have a reason. She studies me for a long moment. You're going to make either a very great leader or a very great problem, she says. I'm hoping for both, I say. She makes a sound that isn't quite a laugh and walks away. Nicholas has observed the full proceedings from the end of the stone table. When I return to my seat after the elder leaves, he is looking at me with that same arrested expression, the one that started in the arch and hasn't fully resolved since. Where did you learn that? He asks. The hollow plague, I say. When you can't fix a disease, you fix the fear of it. Same principle. His eyes move over my face. You've survived a plague, he says. Among other things. And the mountains. And 19 years alone. And today. Today isn't finished. No, he says. But I think the outcome is becoming clear. I meet his gaze. Don't count your results before the elders announce them. I'm not talking about the election, he says. My heart performs its now familiar trick of attempting to escape my ribcage. Nicholas, I say.
Karen, he says.
We sit at opposite ends of the governance table and hold each other's gaze across the length of it, and the air between us has the quality of a held breath, full of everything that hasn't been said yet, and very aware of itself. They keep us waiting until noon on the final day. I spend the morning in my room, moving through the fighting forms I have practiced since I was 15. Not because I need to, because movement is the only thing that quiets the noise in my head. The mate bond has shifted overnight. It is no longer the raw, overwhelming pull of the first day. It has deepened into something more complex and more dangerous, not a scream but a hum.
Constant.
Present. Shaped, now, by 3 days of conversations and silences and the specific, irreplaceable knowledge of who he actually is beneath the file. And by 14 years of wearing his mother's chain. That is harder to fight than the initial pull. I can resist a force. I am less certain I can resist a person who has been connected to me in some small but undeniable way since I was 11 years old. I look at the pendant one last time before I leave my room. In the morning light, the silver veins catch the sun and glow. I think about Myra's hands fastening it around my neck. I think about Thorne's voice saying the blood crow line does not forget its debts. I think about a boy with storm-dark eyes promising to remember my face. And I think about the woman I have become in the years since, the mountains I crossed, the plagues I survived, the arch I walked through. I have earned my place here, not because of a pendant, not because of a bond, because I am Karen Wilson, and I have never stopped walking toward the life I deserve. I tuck the chain back beneath my collar, take a deep breath, and walk out the door. The contenders assemble in the great atrium beneath the amphitheater. We stand in the same kind of formal stillness that I imagine the condemned feel before a verdict. The elder council files in from the north corridor, 7 figures in white and gold, their faces giving nothing away. The head elder takes the center position, unfurls a scroll, and looks up. The trials of dominion, knowledge, combat, and governance have been completed, he says. The Elder Council has reviewed all records, scores, and testimonies. This body will now announce the Alpha head of the next decade. The room is so quiet I can hear my own pulse. The position of Alpha head is awarded, by unanimous decision of this council, to Karen Wilson, independent Alpha of no clan affiliation. Silence. Then chaos. The roar that erupts from the amphitheater above us, where the announcement is simultaneously being broadcast, is tectonic. I feel it in the floor beneath my feet. 10,000 voices, at different registers and different intentions, all released at once. Around me in the atrium, the other contenders' reactions are a spectrum. Kim of Northbridge meets my eyes and nods, slow and respectful. 2 of the others turn away. One starts a formal objection that the head elder silences, with a single raised hand. And Nicholas. Nicholas stands still. His expression, when our eyes meet across the atrium, is something I do not have a category for. Not defeat, not remotely. Not surprise, not resentment. Something older and quieter, and more private than any of those. He holds my gaze, and slowly, deliberately, he inclines his head. Not the slight acknowledgement from the combat ring. This is deeper.
Real.
It says, "You won, fairly, and I know it." It says, "I see you." It says something I am not ready to name. And in his eyes, I see something else. A memory. A promise. The echo of a boy who looked at a kitchen girl 14 years ago and knew, somehow, that she would matter. His lips move, forming words that only I can read. Remember your face.
I have.
I always have. I hold his gaze and incline my own head in return. Then the elder herald is beside me with the formal sash of the alpha head, and there are hands to shake and formalities to complete and the business of power to begin conducting, and the world sweeps me forward into the rest of my life. But before it does, before the herald's hand touches my shoulder, before the sash settles across my chest, before the 10,000 witnesses begin the noise that will follow me out of this amphitheater and into a decade of leadership, Nicholas, and I have one more second. 1 second where his pure black eyes are on mine across the combat ring, and everything that has been building since an amberlit neutral valley 14 years ago is sitting between us in the blazing afternoon light, unhidden, undeniable, and completely out of time. He doesn't move toward me. He doesn't need to. It is me, Karen Wilson, alpha head of the known world, the woman who crossed mountains alone and walked under an arch that hadn't blazed for 400 years and pinned the most feared alpha in the regions to the obsidian floor in front of 10,000 witnesses. It is me who takes the 3 steps across the combat ring that close the distance between us. He goes very still. The kind of still that very large, very dangerous men go when something is happening that they did not allow themselves to believe would happen and are now terrified of startling away. I stop in front of him. My gray storm cloud eyes have to lift to find his pure black ones, and I let them. I stop performing the neutral distance I have maintained since I first felt his gaze on the back of my neck on the platform, and I let my eyes find his completely and hold them without armor. His massive, scarred knuckle hand rises.
Slowly.
With the careful, deliberate attention of a man handling something he already knows matters more than anything he has ever held. His scarred fingers find the crow pendant at my throat, his mother's pendant, his family's pendant, the dark metal threaded with silver veins that has been warm against my lightly tanned skin for 14 years, and his thumb traces the silver veins in the dark metal once, the way you trace something sacred, the way you touch proof of something you weren't certain was real. His pure black eyes drop from mine to the pendant, then back up. Then he says the only thing either of us needs to hear. Nicholas, barely voiced, rough-edged, only for me, his broken, crooked nose a breath from my forehead. I've been waiting since I was 12 years old. And I, who have never in my life done anything I did not choose completely and consciously, and on my own terms, reach up with my right calloused hand, the hand that has done everything I have ever needed it to do, and I close it around the lapel of his wine-dark blood crow leather tunic, and I pull. He comes. Of course he comes. He has been coming toward me since the moment I stepped out of that tunnel. He has been patient and certain and quietly, devastatingly present, and now I am pulling him toward me, and he comes the way tides come, not because they are forced, but because the moon has always been there, and they have always been going to. His massive scarred hands find my face. Both of them. Gentle in a way that has no business existing in hands that have held territories and won battles and clenched into fists hard enough to leave marks in stone, cradling my lightly tanned face with a gentleness that makes the faint pale scar along my left jaw feel like something he has been wanting to touch for 14 years, because he has.
He has.
And then, in the blazing afternoon light of the grand amphitheater of Dominion, in the combat ring where I pinned him to the obsidian floor an hour ago, in front of the elder judges and the other alpha contenders, and every single one of the 10,000 witnesses who thought they had already seen the most impossible thing this amphitheater would ever produce. Nicholas of the Blood Crow clan kisses me. And I let him. And the crow pendant blazes warm between us. Warmer than it has ever been warm. warmer than 14 years of mountains and plague and hard miles, as if it has been waiting for exactly this, as if Mira clasped it around the neck of an 11-year-old girl in kitchen clothes in an amberlit neutral valley, knowing it would one day be pressed between the chest of her son and the woman he was always going to find. The 10,000 witnesses make a sound. I don't hear it. I don't hear anything except the fountain that isn't there, the garden that isn't there, the deep quiet of two people who have been finding their way toward each other since before either of them had the words for what they were and have finally arrived. When we separate, when he draws back and his massive scarred hands are still cradling my face and his pure black eyes are open and close and carrying an expression that will live in every sealed elder report ever written about him for the rest of his life, I look at him. Just look at him. His broken, crooked nose. His 10-inch tousled dark hair damp at the temples. His sharp jaw with its light stubble. His pure black eyes holding mine with the full, unhurried, absolute attention that he has given nothing else with quite this quality since he was 12 years old, and his mother told him to remember my face. I say the only thing that is true. You should have told me sooner. His scarred lips curve. The smile, that smile, the one that has no precedent in his history, the one that transforms the entire architecture of his face, arrives fully, completely, without restraint for the first time. And he says, "You weren't ready sooner." He is right. He has always been right about this. I file it away to tell him never, and feel something in my chest, something that has been a wall for 26 years, put down a single stone. Just one. But it is the first. The elder herald's hand settles on my shoulder. The sash of the alpha head crosses my chest. The world sweeps us both forward. People ask me, sometimes, what it felt like to walk through the arch. I tell them it felt like being seen for the first time by something that had been looking for me for a very long time. They ask what it felt like to win. I tell them it felt like putting down a weight I had been carrying so long I had forgotten it was heavy. They ask, and this is the question they are most careful about, the one they approach sideways, about Nicholas. I tell them that some things are not for questions. Here is what I will say. The mate bond is not what the stories make it. It is not a seizure or a surrender. It is not the erasure of everything you were before. It is, if you let it find its real shape, the discovery of something that exists alongside everything you already are. That makes the hard things harder to carry, because you feel them more deeply, and makes the good things luminous in a way that solo survival never quite managed. The pendant is still around my neck. It has never come off. Not once in 14 years. And now, for the first time, when I touch it, I don't just remember the convocation. I don't just remember saving a family or being rewarded with a token. I remember that I was always meant to be here. And I remember that Nicholas, in his own way, was preparing too. But here is what I have not told you yet. Here is the part that no one in the amphitheater witnessed. The part that happened 3 days after the election, in a room I am not at liberty to describe, when something arrived on my desk that made every hard mile I had ever walked feel like preparation for a war I did not yet know I was fighting. A letter. No seal. No signature. Written in a hand I did not recognize on paper I had never seen before, paper the color of dried bone, with silver veins running through it like frozen lightning, like the pendant, like the arch, like everything that had been pointing towards something I could not yet see.
3 lines.
The arch recognized you.
So did we.
You have until the next full moon to choose which throne you actually want. I read it 3 times. Then I looked at the crow pendant at my throat, warm, silver-veined, 7 generations old, and for the first time in 26 years, in all the mountains and plagues and trials and elections and impossible things I had survived and done and become, I was afraid, not of the letter, of the choice it was describing, because whoever sent it already knew something about me that I had not told Nicholas. Something about the arch's silver light that the Elder Council had not explained publicly. Something about the pendant that Mira had given me with a knowing smile, and a quiet "you will keep it," that I was only now beginning to understand was not a gift.
It was a key.
And somewhere something had been waiting 14 years for me to use it. I went to Nicholas that night. I found him in the East Garden. Of course, I found him in the East Garden, his massive wine-dark blood crow frame on the stone bench, his pure black eyes already on the garden entrance, when I came through it, as if he had been waiting. As if he always knew when I was coming. As if the bond was a compass, and I was always north. I sat down beside him, not across the fountain, beside him, and I put the letter in his scarred hands, and I watched his pure black eyes move across the 3 lines, and I watched his jaw tighten, and his broken nose flare, and his massive scarred hands close slowly around the bone-colored paper with its silver veins. He read it twice. Then he looked at me. And what was in his pure black eyes was not the wonder of the combat ring or the patience of the garden or the smile that has no precedent in his history. It was something I had seen in his eyes only once before. The night in the valley, when 3 armed men moved toward his family and he turned, 12 years old, already broad-shouldered, storm-dark eyes wide and fierce, and planted himself between his parents and danger without hesitating. That look, the look of a man who has just identified a threat to something he will not allow to be threatened. His massive scarred hand closed over mine on the stone bench. His voice was very quiet, very still. When were you going to tell me? I'm telling you now. Karen. And in the way he said my name, low and rough-edged and careful, the way he has said it since the first time in the amphitheater corridor when I told him to stop because it sounded like something he already owned, I heard everything he was not saying. He knew. He already knew what the letter meant. And whatever it meant, whatever the choice was, whatever throne the bone-colored paper was describing, whatever the silver-veined pendant had been a key to for 7 generations, the expression on his face in the torch-lit East Garden told me one thing with the absolute certainty of a man who has been certain of one thing since he was 12 years old. He was not going to let me face it alone. I looked at him, at his pure black eyes in the torch-gold garden light, at the massive scarred hand over mine on the ancient stone, at the broken nose and the tousled dark hair and the sharp jaw and all the pale scar tissue that is the physical record of everything he has survived to be sitting on this bench in this garden on this night. Something in my chest put down another stone. I said quietly, "Then you should know one more thing. Tell me." The arch didn't just recognize me as an alpha.
A beat. The fountain ran. The stars burned. It recognized what I am descended from. The torchlight caught the silver veins of the pendant at my throat. It caught the silver veins in the bone-colored letter still in his massive scarred hand. It caught the silver veins in the obsidian garden walls and the silver veins in the amphitheater stone visible through the garden archway and the silver veins that have run like frozen lightning through every stone of this neutral territory since before any elder alive can remember. All the same veins, all pointing to the same source. Nicholas looked at the pendant, then at my gray eyes, then at the letter. His pure black eyes went very still. His voice was barely voiced. "Karen, what are you?" I closed my hand around the crow pendant at my throat, warm, certain, silver-veined, 7 generations old, clasped around my neck by a woman who smiled like she knew exactly what she was starting, and I felt it pulse. Actually pulse. Like a heartbeat. Like something waking up. This is where the first part of my story ends. And this is where you understand that the arch, the election, the combat ring, the East Garden, the kiss that tasted like 14 years of waiting, all of it, every impossible thing I did and survived and became, was only the first chapter of something much, much older. Part 2. The pendant was never a gift. It was a key to the name they erased. Power without love is a fortress with no doors. I spent 26 years building walls. And I am about to discover that the walls I built, that the arch recognized, that the pendant has been warming toward, that 3 armed men in a neutral valley 14 years ago caught a glimpse of and could not move against, were never mine. They were inherited. And whoever sent that letter knows exactly,
what I inherited them from.
Part 2 is waiting.
And it begins with a name. A name that appears in no elder archive, no clan record, no sealed report. A name that was carved into the obsidian walls of this very amphitheater 400 years ago and then deliberately, carefully, completely removed. My name. Not Karen Wilson. The other one. The one I was born with before my mother changed it. Before she ran. Before she looked at me with those tired, frightened eyes and told me to hide what I was and said the world wasn't ready for the answer. The world is about to find out she was right to be frightened.
And so am I.
If this story found you, you were meant to hear it. If you felt something in your chest when I pulled him toward me by his lapel. If you held your breath when the pendant pulsed in my hand. If those 3 lines on bone-colored paper made your heart stop the way they made mine stop, then you already know you cannot stop here. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because part 2 goes live soon. And the listeners who are here, who are subscribed, who are waiting, will be the first to hear the name that was carved into the obsidian walls and removed. The first to find out what Karen Wilson was born as. The first to hear what Nicholas already suspects and hasn't said yet. The first to discover what the pendant has been waiting 14 years to unlock. The arch is always lit for you here. Leave a comment below. Tell me, what was the moment that stopped your breath? We read every single one. The best chapters are still being written, and they begin with a name.